Liposuction, there's so many different types, it's confusing. How can you tell the difference? So I hope to clear that up. Now, we made this to apply to anybody that's trying to learn about lipo, but always check with your doc who you were getting surgery done from, because they may have different opinions. But let's talk about the types of lipo. Or for you to understand the types of liposuction, I want you to really understand what we're doing. And so I make this diagram a lot, but there's a lot of info packed in here I want to run through. So we're looking at the cross section of just a human tissue, or really any tissue for that matter. We've got skin, we have fat, and then we have muscle. And below that, we have bone, right? So I want you to think about this, because if you ever thought, what keeps your skin attached to your muscle? And one of the things that helps keep your skin attached to your muscle are these little brown fibers I have that run from the muscle to the skin. And that is, I want you to think of superficial fascial system. We abbreviate sort of the SFS. Another way to think about it is just collagen. It's a little simplistic, but for the most part, it works. Also in these superficial fascial systems, we have our blood vessels that supply blood to the skin, right? So I have arteries and veins. They go from the muscles to the skin. And this is going to come important because the main goal of lipo is how do we get the fat cells out from under the skin, in between the skin and muscle, get it out. In your head, you're thinking it exists like this side that I have over there, which is just fat cells. And I get it, because that's what I would think too. But in reality, we've got all these superficial fascial systems, these collagen bundles that hold skin to the muscle, and they hold fat in place. They stop fat from just flying everywhere in your body. So the real goal with lipo, I want you to think about this, is actually how do we get the fat freed from these little jail cells that fat is located in? And that requires work, and it requires energy. And the other thing I want you to think about is, well, could we do it in such a way that doesn't involve us busting up these arteries and veins that are running in between the skin and muscle? So the first thing that came out was, well, first major thing came out was suction lipo system. And it's a cheese grater attached to a vacuum that sucks the fat in. And as it goes through, this cheese grater is actually grating out these little superficial bands, the superficial fascial system, allowing the fat then to be vacuum suctioned out. But at the same time, it doesn't care. It's just grating out your arteries and your blood vessels. And that's actually why there was a lot of bleeding and bruising with traditional suction lipo. And there was a limit on how much fat we could actually really get out, because there's only so much cheese grating you could do to the fat, the superficial fascial system, before we ran into problems. And that really then came in next with power. So if you can imagine, power came, they still had that cheese grater, but the cheese grater wasn't doing a lot of the work. What was actually doing a lot of the work was this rapid back and forth action of the actual power lipo. And by doing that, we were just getting smaller little breaks and a little bit more just sort of delicate breaks in the superficial fascial system. And that allowed for the fat to come out. And also because of the way it sort of vibrated, it didn't bust up the fat cells as much. And it also didn't injure the blood vessels as much. So we saw less bruising and less swelling than we did with traditional lipo, because it was a finer movement getting those fat cells free. The next thing actually came out was ultrasonic waves. So we started to add energy into breaking this up. So if you can imagine, no longer did we have this cheese grater. It actually was a solid device that actually fired out these ultrasonic waves. And these ultrasonic waves actually helped to basically free the fat from the superficial fascial system. And it did in a way that basically kind of counterintuitive, but it basically made bubbles, which sort of created a soap. And the soap just started to pop these fat cells out without even having to break up the superficial fascial system. That's a huge game changer, because now we weren't messing with the blood vessels at all, and we weren't damaging the superficial fascial system structure, so that the tightness of the skin was still there, and we were able to get the fat cells out. Later down the line, when we actually came up with the ability to tighten skin, and we do that by actually tightening these little superficial bands, they were still intact. So ultrasonic liposuction was one of the biggest game changers in lipo to date. And it also allowed the use of future technologies like skin tightening to really make changes. Other things I just want to review, there's another device where we could come in with a laser. So basically it fires light energy and heat, and it would melt the fat. And at first you think, well, that's pretty good, because also it would melt fat down. And you're right, it was a great concept, but the main issue was just there was a really, really thin line between melted fat and a burn. And what happened a lot was we saw a lot of burns with laser lipo, and that's why it's gone away for the most part. Last thing, just for completeness, is actually we could fire water like a nice jet stream out and actually get that to break these little fat cells free They use a lot for liver surgery, and it works really well with liver surgery, but it just has not worked well on the fat. And so that is the complete types of lipo and actually how they work.